Good morning, everyone. It's now 10:30, and I see quite a few folks. I'll wave to Diane, too. Good to see you, Diane. So welcome to our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council meeting. Today's November 20th, and it is now, as I said, 10:30. I am going to begin the meeting as we have kind of scheduled at 10:30, but a number of our kind of executive folks from the county won't be able to join because of a conflict. So I'll let you know who those folks are, and they'll probably be joining us closer to about 10:30. But I want to use the time that we've set aside appropriately, and I know that their voices can be heard once they get joined. So I will begin with the roll call. And just to note, those members who will be joining later will be Commissioner Josh Slotnick, Under Sheriff Rich Marcelli, Judge Lenny Holloway, Kirsten Papps, Mayor Engen, Chantel Gaynor, Aaron Pian, Lori Francis, Judge Alex Beal, Ann Hughes, and Dale Bickle. So if I said your name and you are joined, please let me know. And with that, I guess hearing none, I'll go to the other folks that may have joined us today.
I'm sorry, Judge Halligan, this is Chantel. I am here.
Great. Thank you, Chantel. I appreciate you joining us. Next is Chief White, and I'm not certain if Chief White was able to join us or Assistant Chief Scott Hoffman.
Chief Jason White's here.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Welcome. I think this is the first time I've gotten to greet you, and I certainly appreciate your time joining us today.
Thank you.
Jennifer Striano or Michelle Lyday from the Public Defender's Office.
I'm here, Judge. This is Jennifer Striano.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Julie Merritt or Heather Harp.
Julie here. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Heather's here as well.
Perfect. Thank you for both joining. Commander Kowalski from the jail or Lieutenant Halls.
Alex is here.
Thank you, Alex. Keithy Worthington or Angie Bakken from the City Attorney's Office. Kim Laheth or Brian Kellerman from Probation and Parole.
I'm here, Judge.
Thanks, Kim. And I see that Judge Holloway's joined us. Thanks, Landy.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Judge Jenks or Judge Lerman from the City Attorney or from the City Court, Municipal Court.
Judge Jenks is here.
Thank you, Judge Jenks. Malin Smith or Ann Miller from Salish Kootenai Tribe.
Ann Miller is here. I think Malin is joining us also.
All right, thanks, Ann. Next, Deshane Barnett or Dr. Ann Douglas from First Nations, All Nations. So hopefully one can join. Caitlin Borgman. Chantel is here. Jenny Daniel is a possibility. So Jenny, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for joining. Aaron Pian, I said, might be joining later. And Teresa Williams.
Teresa's here.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. Lori Francis or Rebecca Go or Jody Faircloth. So I think Lori may join us a little bit later. From pretrial supervision, Sue Wilkins or Maria McLean. So I know that Sue has been kind of busy managing her office with a few absences. So I'm hoping that they can join. Shirley Faust from the Clerk of the District Court. Courtney Callahan from Child and Family Services.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Courtney. Welcome. Chief Ludeman from the University of Montana. Amy Sings in the Timber from the Innocence Project.
I'm here, Judge. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amy. You had a nice article recently. Congratulations on that. Sergeant Finley, Captain Dever from Highway Patrol. Joe Thagert from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Lori Pope or Bart Hope And I saw Lori.
I am here.
Great, Lori. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get rolling, again, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional homelands of the Salish and Pend Oreille tribes, and to acknowledge those tribes' contributions to both historically and currently to our work. Again, even on Zoom, or I guess we're on Teams, even on Teams, we have our feet on the ground, and those were native ground. With regard to updates, I'd like to just offer to folks an opportunity. I know we've had many special groups or kind of working groups out there, and we don't often ask for updates, but I'm wondering if any of the groups would like to provide just a brief update about the work that they've been doing in their small group focused areas. So this is kind of a free for all. Either raise your hand and I'll call on you, or just join in, chime in. Don't be shy. So next time I'll give you a little more warning so you can prep a little bit. Don't want to single anybody out or leave anybody out. And so, as many of you know, we have been blessed really with the Safety and Justice Challenge grant, and we're on the precipice of submitting a renewal grant. To be quite honest, we had some lofty goals, and we've not perhaps presented as many of the deliverables that we had hoped once to do. We can make, I guess, lots of excuses about that, or at least bring to the attention the COVID issues and kind of all of our restructuring as a result of those. But this really provides us an opportunity to address some very long-standing problems. And I'm hoping that you'll all maintain and become even more engaged so we can address those priorities. A part of our discussions today will be to discuss where we're at and kind of where we want to be and what efforts we're willing to invest in those programs. As I think I've mentioned in the past, you know, we've had problems with kind of processing issues, overcrowding in our detention facility, issues with trying to figure out how best to make decisions about who's in custody, who's out of custody, lots of issues with regard to disparate minority impacts. And the support that we could continue to receive through the Safety and Justice Challenge really allows us an opportunity to do some deep dives in areas that we've really not made much progress in over the years. And so I hope that I can ask you to continue your efforts, to kind of ramp up your efforts, really to take advantage of these opportunities. Certainly, you know, we can do this work, but the financial aspects, the best practice management, the experts that we have available to us when we work with the MacArthur Foundation really expands our opportunities. And I know that, you know, this grant funding isn't guaranteed. And unless we can demonstrate that we're really serious about these issues and we're willing to tackle them, you know, we might not be awarded further funding. So I encourage all of your continued efforts. I hope that you're motivated to address these problems. These are problems that have long plagued us, and we have a great opportunity to continue to address them. We've done some good work, but there's a lot of good work ahead, and it will take an investment by all of us to get that done. So just with that, part of our work is to address some of the projects for the grant, and we're fortunate to have Tom Eberly here from Justice Management to help guide us today. Certainly, he has a wealth of expertise. He joined the Justice Management Institute, JMI, in May of 2015 as the program director after more than 20 years in the criminal justice system at the county level. At JMI, he serves as a site coordinator for the MacArthur Foundation Safety and Justice Challenge. He also provides technical assistance to criminal justice coordinating councils across the country, just like us, and he's here for us. He helps oversee the National Network of Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils, and prior to working at JMI, Tom served as the Criminal Justice Coordinator in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, where he created and managed the Mecklenburg County Criminal Justice Services, which, much like ours, consisted of pretrial services, treatment courts, forensic evaluation, reentry services, and criminal justice planning. And before moving to North Carolina, Tom was the deputy director at the Institute for Law and Policy Planning in Berkeley, California, where he analyzed and provided recommendations to criminal justice systems across the country. In addition, he served as the criminal justice coordinator for the Summit and Lake counties in Ohio. So I know that many of us have history like Tom's in the system. I know we have some good ideas for change, and I know that with our focus, we've identified issues and we've, again, made some good progress, but there's good progress to be made ahead. And every day we get frustrated with things that happen. This is an opportunity to kind of coalesce and provide some good direction, best practices for addressing many of these issues. So Tom, I've probably gone through plenty of what I've needed to say, so perhaps I'll just turn it over to you and we can get started with regard to the overview of the grant and some of our priority areas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Judge. I appreciate the introduction and the sentiments that you shared regarding the safety and justice challenge in your community. Before I get started, I wanted to introduce my colleague, Natalie Michaelides. Natalie's also on the line with us today, and she's been assisting me as a site coordinator for Missoula County over the past few months. Again, I just want to thank everyone for your time today and your involvement in this project. The Safety and Justice Challenge is a national endeavor by the MacArthur Foundation to safely reduce mass incarceration in America's jails. There are, I forget the exact number, but there are millions of Americans in our jails across the country, costing more than $1 billion per year. And so the MacArthur Foundation wanted to change that. And they also wanted it to, at the same time, to address racial and ethnic disparities in the criminal justice system, while hand in hand with that initiative, improve community engagement and justice decision-making. So Missoula County developed a plan to reduce your jail population, and racial and ethnic disparities a couple years back. And the foundation awarded the county $1.4 million over a 2-year period to essentially, follow through with the strategies that you all created. That plan that was produced by Missoula County has actually produced modest results. And the goal that was set for you was to get your jail population at about 149 inmates, which is on par with other jurisdictions your size. The number of people in your jail has not declined very much as a result of the plan itself, although the jail has gone down recently because of the impact of COVID. So back in June and July, with the assistance of Kristen and Quinn, we kind of did a dive into the data of your jail to figure out, what's driving the jail population. And what we found were 4 significant contributors to the jail population. The first one was failures to appear. The second was a significant number of probation violators. Third was pretrial revocations in your jail. And then last, this is more of a recent phenomenon, is an increase in the average length of stay for felony pretrial defendants. Again, due in part to COVID and the impact of COVID on court operations. So identifying those 4 things, over the past couple of months, we've reached out to individuals in your criminal justice system to get their input to the causes of these drivers, and also to ask them about possible solutions to those challenges. And today we'd like to share some of those ideas that came from those interviews with you and get your input on which ideas you think will produce the best results that are the best fit for your community. Then we'll get your jurisdiction closer to the goals of the Safety and Justice Challenge. Before we share those ideas, I want to acknowledge there's concern about an increase in violent crime in your community, especially during this period of COVID. Some may feel or say that discussing reducing the jail population when there might be an uptick in violent crime is not prudent. But the Safety and Justice Challenge was never about getting persons with violent charges out of custody. The Safety and Justice Challenge is about eliminating the over-reliance of incarceration when alternatives may be more productive and less harmful to the individual and to your community. By removing individuals who are nonviolent and low risk from your jail, you're actually creating more bed space for individuals who the community actually is afraid of and that you want to be incarcerated. So pursuing safe jail reductions while ensuring violent individuals are incarcerated really isn't incompatible ideas at all. They're actually very complementary because you're making the best use of your limited resources. So as I mentioned, we brought together some folks over the past couple of months and bantered different ideas, and we jotted those down, and we'd like to share those with you today. So we're going to delve into those ideas that were generated. We've already provided you a document with several tables that list those ideas. And if I could get Kristen to share her screen, that would be fantastic.
Working on it now.
Okay.
And of course, now that the moment is here, I'm having a little difficulty. I apologize. I need to close. Yep.
While Kristen does that, I'll just remind everyone that the meeting's being recorded. And you'll note that I skipped over the kind of approval of last meeting's minutes. I'll join and do that right before public comment to make sure that we have as many participants as possible to address that.
All right. For whatever reason, now that the moment is on, I'm unable to share it. And I think I apologize. I will just need a second longer. I'm really sorry, Tom. I didn't anticipate this.
Does anyone have any questions about the Safety and Justice Challenge? The way I like to think about it is I think your jail population right now is in the high 160s. We don't count the non-local inmates in the overall count. And so the foundation set a goal of 149 inmates. And so we're essentially talking about reducing your jail population by 21 safely, I would emphasize, in exchange for $1.4 million to do what you feel is best for your system. It's not the foundation telling you what to do with your system. It's them saying to you, give us your best ideas and we'll help you make those happen.
So, and Tom, as I kind of mentioned at the outset, I've been working in criminal justice probably 30 years here. And over the course of time, there clearly have been issues that we have identified. And I think the benefit of really focusing on some of these issues is that it brings together the necessary stakeholders. That has been very difficult to do, and not so much because we don't get along, just because we're all overwhelmed kind of with the kind of work ahead and the work that we do. And I think, fortunately, we all have similar viewpoints. There's always some discrepancies, but I think we all want to do what's best and to follow best practices, and we're interested to know what best practices are. But sometimes just everybody's kind of taking a different route, and without collaborating about how to fix the problem just doesn't seem to get fixed. And so I'm hoping really with more research about what is best practices, which also allays some of the fears about community safety. We all perceive that different offenders present as perhaps a different risk, but having kind of ways to assess actual risk or predict risk has been very helpful, and those are tools that we haven't had available. So, I think the benefits are so great at this point to really look at some of the problems and mutually try to solve them, that I hope that I can encourage folks to really come to the table and bring all of those concerns and kind of what strategies that we've tried in the past that have been unsuccessful to work at developing new strategies that will be successful now and will continue in the future. So those are some of my thoughts about how better to address some of these issues. And we're seeing some success. I know that Ann Miller's having success on the kind of tribal front. So there are some successful programs around that we're hoping we can draw from to help us move the needle kind of to a better criminal justice system.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the foundation's been doing this now for 5 years, and they have more than 50 jurisdictions involved in the safety and justice challenge. And they're kind of emerging from across the sites that are working really well. And I think some of the ideas that were discussed with the different stakeholders in your county really align with those. So you guys are on the right path. It's just a matter of making sure that we have sufficient buy-in to, make this realistic and achievable. And I definitely think that's possible in your county.
Great. We do appreciate your support. Did somebody else want to make a comment? Well, Kristen does her tech work.
This is really awkward. I have no idea what's happening. It shouldn't be this hard. Tom, I'm so sorry. We're working on a few things in the background.
Natalie, could you save it or share it?
Kristen's sending it to me right now.
Okay.
Or sending it.
Hi, this is Julie Merritt with the City Council. Thanks for being here. I guess since we're filling a little bit of time here, I wonder if you could share with us some of the successes that some other communities have had, especially during these COVID times.
Well, COVID's really presented a unique challenge, and what we've seen in other jurisdictions is they've really taken steps to reduce the number of individuals coming into the jail through diversion at arrest, which I think is something similar to what you all have done. They're also taking aggressive actions in terms of putting people out on, some kind of supervision of release, or more emphasis on release on recognizance rather than relying on financial bonds, just to avoid having people come into the jail potentially bringing something or catching something when they're in the jail. The strategies that we've seen that work really well in other sites is related to case processing, making sure that cases are processed in a timely manner. The expansion of pretrial services and the enhancement of pretrial services programs, especially across the country. Diversion from arrest, especially with the frequent utilizer population, which is your homeless, maybe with coexisting conditions, such as behavioral health and or substance abuse. And so stuff along those lines have really worked well.
Thanks.
I was gonna, if it's okay, this is Erin Couts. I'm a grants administrator with Missoula County. And when we first wrote the first MacArthur Foundation grant, we didn't have a CJCC. It was very challenging to do all the outreach to gather the information of what strategies we were going to use. So I just can't stress enough how important it is to, make sure to put your opinions and thoughts in now, because it's very helpful for us when we're writing the grant. So I thank everybody who's attending today and who's answered the survey and who's been involved, because it really helps us as we move forward. So I just want to mention that.
Okay. So now
Natalie saved the day.
Natalie saved the day. Excellent. Can everyone see that okay?
It's kind of good, but Natalie, if you can blow it up a tiny bit, that might be good for those of us who's near our close-up vision. That's great, I think. Better for folks? Go for it, Tom.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we identified several challenges. the failure to appear, the probation violations, the pretrial revocations, the length of stay during the pretrial stage for particularly the felony cases. We also recognize that some things didn't fit in those categories neatly. And so we have what we call justice operations as a challenge. And really what we heard is that you're just all very stretched, extremely thin with your resources. And then lastly, of course, is one of the pillars of the safety and justice challenge is to address racial and ethnic equity issues. So those are the challenges, and then you see the desired outcomes. And I'm just going to move along for the sake of time and expediency. So we gathered these ideas specifically to share with you and to generate a discussion on what the CJCC thinks is the best path forward for addressing the drivers of your jail population and safely reducing the population. Ideally, what we'd like to see is that you have 5 or 6 strategies that you're really excited about and would pursue over the next couple of years, and include those in your grant renewal application. And as we go through this exercise, it's quite possible that new ideas may emerge that are better than the ones we have down already, and that would be fantastic and encouraged. In identifying any new strategies, it's critical that the CJC embrace these initiatives and make sure that there's a firm commitment to them, because it didn't seem like that really happened the first time, and I think even Aaron alluded to that. So on the first page, when we talk about the challenge of failures to appear, the goal is obviously to reduce that. And this is really a significant driver. It's probably the most of the 4 that I mentioned. And we did a little analysis on the side before we got together with you all. And we just randomly pulled cases from the jail. And what we found was that the courts were actually very accommodating in trying to get people into court when they failed to appear, and often gave multiple chances for people to kind of get their body into the courtroom. And really what we found is that it's the problem rests on the side of the defendant, and the defendant has to make sure that they're well informed about the court event and probably all the things that go with attending court, such as having transportation, daycare, getting off work, and so forth. So in this table, what we've done is we've presented 3 ideas, 3 strategies. And the first one is to improve court reminders. And I want to share with you that that's not a specific strategy. It's a general idea, right? That's not the answer. I mean, it's the concept of addressing the problem. So that still needs to be worked on if that's chosen by the group as something you want to pursue. What exactly does it mean to improve court reminders? But that was something that was said over and over again. And when we kept hearing something said over and over again, or people latched onto an idea and they liked it, we put those at the top of the list, so to speak. And so they're noted as the top 3 choices, so to speak, for you all to consider. But there were also other ideas that came up. And those ideas are noted down below in the gray box. And I don't want to discard those because maybe during the course of today and future meetings, you realize that these are better than the ones that are up above. But just saying that, the first one is to improve court reminders. The second one was to create a community-supported release program. This is a program where essentially you refer someone to a community-based organization who then works with that defendant to make sure that they have everything they need to show up for court: transportation, daycare, et cetera, et cetera. They're even talking with them to make sure that they understand the ramifications for not showing up, making sure they know exactly where to show up on that particular day. They're kind of like a navigator, a peer support person who will just hold their hand and walk them through the process. Then we have limit the number of hearings defendants must attend, especially in municipal and justice courts. And what you'll see next to each one of those is a number, and those numbers represent a survey that we gave to the CJCC prior to this meeting today. And we asked you to rank on a scale of 1 to 10 how likely you were to support one of those ideas that were listed there in that table. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very likely, you can see that improved court reminders received an 8, the community supported release received an 8, and the improving or limiting, the number of hearings defense must attend received a 6. Down below, you see the other ideas. And one of the numbers that obviously jumps out is 94% for establish remote locations for defendants to attend court hearings via video conferencing. The methodology here in the survey is a little bit different than what you see above. Down below, it was just a matter of the person saying, would you support that, yes or no? And 94% said that they liked that idea. Another idea that generated a lot of support, actually almost all of them did, was to increase the number of phones available through the mobile loaner program that you have. Going back to the items up above, you see the anticipated impact. Here's where we kind of just took a stab at saying, if you were to implement improved court reminders, we think that it could have a high to medium impact on reaching your goal with the foundation and reducing your jail population. And we also estimated the cost, again, using high, medium, or low. And we feel like it wouldn't be a tremendous cost to pull that off, and it might actually be quite low. And then you see strategy crossover, and that column represents where we think that particular idea might also benefit one of the other challenges that you're facing. And in that case, with the court reminders, it might also help reduce the pretrial revocations, the length of stay issue, and the justice organization, or justice operations, excuse me. So, having shared that, is there any feedback on the idea of trying to reduce the failure to appears and the ideas that were put together?
So Tom, I would just mention that, with COVID, we've done a lot of transition. I think courts across the country have done a lot of transition. It did take us a while to get the Zoom platform available for all of the judges and really all of the court system. But now that it is available and most of us have become somewhat proficient in using it, it really is opening opportunities for many defendants, both kind of in Missoula proper and throughout the state and even throughout the country, to attend hearings by video. And so we're seeing, that as a result, perhaps, of the COVID crisis, that many of our technology options have increased, and we really are allowing many people to appear. We still allow people to appear in person, but we somewhat discourage it and encourage people, because of kind of the high rates of virus spread, encourage people to appear by phone. So we have many people who are appearing via Zoom from their phones, sitting in their cars or at their homes or wherever they might be. So I do think that we've gotten a boost a little bit with regard to that, and people have become a little more comfortable doing that. And so I think that's moved us a bit in the right direction. It seems to me, given the numbers, that there's a fair amount of buy-in to making it easier for everyone to attend hearings. And the issue about the court reminders, I think, continues to persist despite these efforts to make it easier to appear in court. We're still having trouble with people tracking when their court hearings are. And although we're not necessarily issuing warrants when that happens, we're trying to defer those cases. It would be great to try to figure out a productive, kind of easy to use system that would help people know when they're really supposed to be in court.
Mm-hmm.
And Judge Jenks, I'm not certain from the municipal court side, but I would expect your experience is similar, that despite reminding people multiple times and giving them pieces of paper with their court times that they still often forget when they're supposed to be in court.
Well, I mean, our experience over here with COVID has taken us into an entirely different world of we really can't get people to come to court right now. The word is out that we can't put anybody in jail and there's no upside to coming to court. So, I mean, our failure to appear is skyrocketing, and it is somewhat better with Zoom than it was with phone calls, but we are having a really hard time getting people to appear. The improved court reminders, as Kristen knows, is something that has to be somehow pushed through at a state level. A system exists out there, and the state IT program is, or the state IT is saying, no, we're not going to support that. We're not going to do it. And I think that's really unfortunate, but I don't know that it's anything that our county or this group is necessarily going to be able to fix. And I wish that we could somehow drill through that. I don't know how to do that. And I don't know that Kristen has figured out how to do that, although I know she's thrown herself out there and given it a shot. It is a fairly sturdy wall that needs to be broken down.
I do have an update. The state is not making it a priority right now. They're updating full court enterprise, and I was reminded that criminal proceedings are not the only thing that they need to worry about. However, we may have a local solution that will be better than not, that we may be able to talk about more. Just not sure where that's going to fall in the conversation. I also just wanted to note that Susan Cortina has her hand up as well.
So Susan?
I just wanted to ask if there's any issues with changing court dates, and does that relate to not showing up? Is that a factor?
Court continuances and things like that, like people not really being told when their court was changed?
Well, maybe they're told, but if you aren't paying attention, you just have it as a certain date and then it gets changed for whatever reason. I don't know if that's an issue or not. That was my question.
So, I do think that happens. And as I mentioned, when that happens and it's been like a change that's occurred, we typically look back to confirm the person, knew about it or didn't know about it or was likely or unlikely to know about it, and sometimes have to reset it out and just try to kind of regather the wagons and get people back on track. But what Judge Jenks brings up is, without the threat of jail, people are at this point blowing off their appearances and municipal court. And that's obviously something we don't want to encourage, but we also don't want to use just the threat of jail to get people to come to court. We want them to understand that, in being involved in the process and getting it resolved quickly is really better for everybody's purposes than deferring and kind of avoiding all of these things. So it's probably going to take all of our minds kind of working together and all of us working together to figure out how to motivate people to be more responsible, but making sure they know, just like all of us, it's pretty easy to miss calendar or forget something, or something else is in crisis and they forget what they're supposed to do until later. So, I do think that if we can come up with some kind of a local solution or even a local effort and see that we have positive change, it would give us greater ammunition to try to break down these kind of statewide barriers and improve everybody's system, because it's not unique to us that people don't show up to their court hearings.
And I got to tell you, Salt Lake County is doing something I think is so cool. They're actually allowing the defense attorney in conjunction with their defendant, or client, I should say, to go use a doodle poll to set their court date, which I think is pretty interesting. Because one of the things that we repeatedly heard in our conversations with the people in your system is that a lot of times when the defense is standing there before the judge, it's all a blur to them and they don't remember, and they're not very cognizant of when the next court date is. And right then you start losing them. And so that's why court reminders have been very effective in other jurisdictions, and there's a lot of research that supports that. Getting back to what we'd like to get out of this meeting today, is that we have all these different ideas, right? And we're going to overwhelm you. I apologize in advance, but we really want to identify 5 to 7 things that you think are real strong opportunities to have the impact that we're looking for, and that you all can get behind it and would say, yes, this is something we would want to pull off. And so as we go through this list, if you wouldn't mind just keeping a tally of things that you support. And what I think we'll end up doing is asking you to form like a little work group to then follow up and work on these ideas specifically in greater detail. And again, I'll use improved court reminders as being a very generic idea that needs more development. So moving on to the second set of challenges, or the second challenge, I should say. So here we also found a significant number of probation violators in your jail. And we talked with folks, and one of the things that was recommended and seemed to have a lot of favor for in these discussions, at least, was to place a duly licensed social worker who can assess substance abuse and behavioral health in the probation department and do those assessments to assist the court, making sure that they're putting the person in the right program and services. And also there was a belief that such a process would ease the burden on the social workers in the public defender's office. And you can see that received a score of 7 in terms of how likely the 18 respondents to the survey would support such an idea. We also have improved evaluation process and adopt a risk-based approach to probation violations. And then lastly, we have adopt practices to reduce compliance violations in the municipal court. And I just want to explain this one a little bit better. The state just went through justice reinvestment, and they've developed a structure to handle probationers so that when they kind of go off course, so to speak, that there's an internal mechanism, sanctions, whatever you want to call them, incentivizers to bring them back into compliance. And in talking with some folks, they didn't feel like that same structure was available at the municipal level. And so that results in a lot of people just getting violated rather than trying to bring them back into compliance. I don't know if that's true, but that's the belief that some folks had in your jurisdiction. Down below, you see some other suggested strategies, and the higher scoring ones were to assess the impact of fines and fees, and also to adopt a common definition of absconding to distinguish between those who are just not reporting, they're probably still in your county, they're just not showing up, and those that are leaving the state and truly trying to flee prosecution. So that's the probation violations. The third challenge is the pretrial revocations. And here we had, again, 3 ideas. One is to fix the public safety assessment process so that people have trust in the tool. We heard quite a few complaints about the PSA and concerns about it being reliable and valid. And there's things that can be done, for example, such as validating the tool locally and improving the training to make sure that the information that's captured in the risk assessment is accurate and truly does show the risk level and the likelihood for failure to appear and commit new offenses. The second item there is to reassess drug testing practices and establish a new policy. From what we saw when we looked at the jail data and in talking with stakeholders, there's quite a strong emphasis on drug testing, and it often exceeds the national standards in terms of what they recommend for drug testing. Some defendants are getting tested 2 or 3 times a week, which is very unusual, quite honestly. And it should be, relative to the charges and the defendant's history, not a blanket requirement for drug testing. Also, we see the strategy being recommended for assessing the impact of fines and fees again, as it pertains to pretrial revocations. And I'll go back to the drug testing. If the defendant is expected to pay for that, it can be very costly, especially if it's occurring multiple times per week. And that may lead to someone saying, I'm not showing up because I can't afford to. And so that's just something that needs to be studied and understood a little bit better. Down below, you see some other suggested ideas. One that received quite a bit of favorable response was just making sure that the conditions that are imposed on pretrial defendants is the least restrictive necessary to make sure that the individual shows up for court and does not commit new offenses while pending trial. So those were the ideas developed for the pretrial revocations. Moving down to the 4th challenge that was identified, this related to the length of stay for the pretrial population. In here, 3 ideas were to create an inventory system where cases can be evaluated based on their complexity and how long they've been pending and what's missing in terms of discovery, et cetera, that might be slowing that case down. And when you inventory the cases, you can kind of break them into categories that will help you identify those cases that can be processed really quickly, those that maybe require some attention to kind of get them fixed and get them back on track. And then the last thing is those cases that really are just going to take time because they're very intensive and usually involve victims and things that make it just a lot more complicated. So by inventorying those cases, you can essentially whittle down the backlog that you may be experiencing. The second strategy that was suggested here is to adopt scheduling orders. A scheduling order essentially is something that's done very early in the processing of the case, and the judge, in consultation with the attorneys, will say, this is the expectations I have for you in terms of exchange and discovery, which also includes telling the law enforcement agency, we expect you to have these items available to the prosecutor and the defense by such and such a date. And then you're also setting the subsequent hearings up front, so everyone knows what the process will be in terms of setting the case. And this has been one of the more successful strategies that other jurisdictions in the Safety and Justice Challenge have adopted. It's just really kind of brought focus to making sure that the case is moving along, and it's been found helpful to reduce requests for continuances because those expectations are spelled out way up front. And then we have improved calendaring process and communication regarding court dates. This is something that came up quite a bit in our conversations with stakeholders, is that oftentimes the court dates will change and the probation department, for example, won't be aware of those changes. And it's just something that it'd be nice if there was like an automatic notification or alert that was set every time a court date is changed so that everyone understands. If you look at the scoring, again, you see a 7 and 7 for the first 2, and then the last one's an 8. I should have mentioned that I put the strategies that scored above an 8 or above. I highlighted those to accentuate the fact that they were more favorably received than the other strategies that were put on the tables. And so I just want to share that with you. Down below, you see some other ideas that were suggested by the group, such as improving scheduling when there are multiple cases for a defendant, and making sure that time standards are maybe considered when processing cases. Okay, moving on to the fifth challenge. This is justice operations. And again, I just want to explain this a little bit. The idea here is that the justice system resources are stretched thin, and this creates hardships on your staff and the agencies that they work for. And so what we would like to see is you implement these new ideas that will hopefully reduce some of that burden. One of the ideas that was actually the highest scoring in terms of the responses received on the survey was to develop a release support specialist position. And this position would be at the jail and assisting folks as they're on the verge of being released, and communicating with the inmate or / defendant, making sure that they have everything they need to successfully go out in the community again, whether it's a ride home, access to housing, maybe referrals to services, that they understand what the next thing that's going to happen to them in court and when that court date will take place. This idea was very well received, and is something that quite a few people feel should be supported by the grant funds. Next, you have to create a jail population manager, and this position would be responsible for essentially going through the jail roster every day and looking for individuals who could potentially be moved to an alternative setting. It might include people who are detained on fairly low bonds and have not made it. And so maybe it might be more appropriate after, it's been proven that they don't have the resources to request a release on recognizance as opposed to a money bail and placed on supervision as well. It also could assist with things such as making sure that the outstanding warrants from other jurisdictions are resolved, making sure that there's a pathway for them to move to DOC or treatment services, and those aren't being clogged up by the system for some reason. And so it's just a coordinator to keep things moving in the jail population and being dedicated to that responsibility. Last, and this also received a fairly high score, is to expand the use of diversion. And this is pre-arrest diversion in particular. And the idea here is to just totally avoid bringing people in the criminal justice system as much as possible, especially when the situation may be better suited for other systems, such as the social services system or the mental health system or so forth. And again, this is a very generic strategy. We need to know exactly what does it mean when we say diversion. What would that program look like? And that's something that would have to be discussed with this work group that I mentioned that should be formed. Down below, one of the most really popular suggestions that was generated by these interviews was the idea of just expanding the number of sober living houses in your jurisdiction. And there are also strong support for adopting procedural justice practices, and procedural justice practices are there to really assist you. Let me rephrase that. Procedural justice practices are there to make the justice system seem more fair to the defendant, and that they understand exactly what's happening, because things are just slowing down a little bit with them by the judge taking the time to explain what's going on, explain why they made the decision they did, and providing the guidance and making sure that they understand what the next steps are. Procedural justice also includes making sure that all forms and signage around your justice system are easily to understand, and will assist people in just navigating the criminal justice system on their own without the assistance of a navigator. So that's some ideas and strategies that were thrown out for improving justice operations.
I just have a question with regard to the warrant issue. Did that come up on district court or lower courts? Was there more specificity about that?
Yes, that was specifically for the older municipal level type charges and traffic.
Are you aware of that also being applied to kind of the more felony related cases as well in other jurisdictions?
Not really. I've heard discussions about that. I think in general, some jurisdictions are just very concerned about the perception of dismissing a warrant on a felony. So what we're seeing is mostly with the traffic and misdemeanor. And again, not all misdemeanors. You would never purge a domestic violence, for example, or DUI, and other charges. But some of those, that are 5, 10, 15 years old that are still there, even if that person got rearrested and was brought back to your jurisdiction, and if they didn't have anything else that caused them to get rearrested, in all likelihood, they're just going to be given credit for time served and let go. And so the idea here is, don't bring these people into your jail, especially if the case is that old, and purge them. If that's not appealing to the judges and your community, I think another idea that was suggested is the idea of having warrant clinics where you allow people to reach out to an attorney during a Saturday afternoon, for example, and ask them to reschedule the court hearing without any worries about repercussions for missing that a court hearing that got the bench warrant.
Yeah, thank you very much for the clarification. Sometimes the law school actually gets involved in some of these projects. I noticed that Jordan Gross might be on the line and she's a professor there. But the idea of warrant clinics or some assistance from kind of the law school might even be an interesting idea. So I'll just throw that out there for her.
And that's very common in jurisdictions as well, to have local law.
So I could just, this is Jordan. Thank you, Judge Halligan. Just really briefly, as you might know, several years ago, we lost our in-house criminal defense clinic. So you're right, this is something we could talk offline about whether we can reintroduce something at the law school, but right now we don't have that structure in place.
Great, thank you, Jordan.
Okay. Moving on to.
Sorry, Tom, I note that Judge Jakes has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to note that we already have a purging system. We purge most things. Well, we purge traffic stuff at about 10 years. We don't process them as quickly. We get behind on it, but I mean, that's already in place, I think. I just wanted to point that out, that that's something that we've been doing for about a year and a half. So.
Okay, great.
And I guess I'd just throw out there, even though we wouldn't necessarily be purging warrants, my thought would be that having a warrant clinic to try to get those people who just were afraid to come to court and they don't want to then do anything because they're also afraid of going to jail. I mean, I think the district courts are plenty willing to do that as well, if there's a means to get folks to come in and address those warrants.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on to challenge 6, and this is the last table that we'll share with you. This is regarding the racial and ethnic, equity. And I will share with you that we didn't generate a lot of ideas, and it's unfortunate, and I think it's indicative of the challenge of this particular topic. But I think there are strong opportunities, and I know that Kristen is working with a group of individuals to form a BIPOC community support group, not support group, I'm sorry, subcommittee.
Expert working group.
Yeah, subcommittee. And I think that's going to generate some positive ideas and strategies as well. But one of the ideas that was shared and proposed was the idea of creating a Native peer support specialist / advocate. And this position, if created through the grant, would work with the Native population and assist them, like we talked about with the other peer support navigator positions above, in assisting this particular population and making sure that they understand how the court process works and then have the resources to follow through with the obligations that the court has laid out for them in terms of court appearances, any requirements they've placed on them for pretrial release and or probation. And we just think that liaison would be quite powerful in breaking down some of the things that trip people up between the two sides. We also talked about the need to produce data dashboards specifically on race and ethnicity so that we can track trends in your criminal justice system and as they pertain to race and ethnicity. And I guess say that, this was quite evident during COVID when we saw that there was a fairly noticeable disparity between those that were released during COVID that were white and those who were Native. And the Native population was staying much longer than the white population. They weren't getting released as quickly as the whites. So we wouldn't know that without that data, and it then is an opportunity to use that new knowledge to say, what can we do better? And that's the key to really making a commitment to developing data dashboards. And then lastly, one of the strategies is just to make sure that everything that we do from this point forward, especially as it pertains to the Safety and Justice Challenge, we want to make sure that it doesn't exacerbate, the disparities that may exist between whites and persons of color in terms of the outcomes in the criminal justice system.
Julie Merritt has her hand up.
Hi, thanks. I guess on this point, I think one of the things I haven't heard talked about is the number of refugees that we now have in our community and the challenges that are presented when we have people who do not speak English as a first language, getting through the court system, and when they are when as part of their sentence, they're required to do some type of program that they don't even know how to get into. And I think we need to address the challenges of the language barrier for people who don't speak English as a first language.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we've shared a bunch of ideas with you. What we have to do is take these ideas, see if there's support in terms of bringing them into greater clarity or fruition in terms of their development. And then obviously the support of the CJCC and putting them in the application and over the next 2 years working to implement them. I'm really looking to you all for advice on how you'd like to proceed. Like I said, the ideal application has 5 to 7 strategies attached to it. We've identified the drivers of your jail population. One strategy or idea may be to pick one idea out of each one of those challenge areas, or maybe a couple of ideas out of those challenge areas, and put those into the development phase and then ultimately into your grant application. Or maybe you just really feel like these 2 or 3 things really capture what we need to do, and they might rest all in 1 or 2 challenge areas. So I really do want to throw it back to you, hear your thoughts on how you'd like to proceed, because we do have to get something together over the next 2 to 3 weeks in terms of developing these ideas. And then, of course, allowing enough time for Aaron and Kristen and the whole team to write the application. I'd also like to throw out there that maybe you have something else that you think is a better idea after you saw these ideas that we put together. that you think would really work, and we would be open to those ideas as well. So I'd like to go to the group.
I apologize. I did see Mr. Tannenbaum's hand up for a moment. Did you still have a question or comment, Mr. Tannenbaum?
I just wanted to identify, I guess, what I would see as a low-hanging fruit of the ideas that Thomas just put forth, with fines and fees as an obstacle to people sort of stabilizing their lives. One idea is to just create a sort of presumption that if the person qualified for a public defender, that they're not able to pay subsequent fines and fees, like for drug testing and things like that. And that would really prevent unnecessary means testing from going on throughout the course of their case. And yeah, it just seems like a solution that we could sort of implement almost instantly with people who are on this call without really requiring extra funding or coordination with the state, which I know is going to be an obstacle going forward.
Lori, I think you.
Did you say Lori?
Yes, go for it.
First of all, thank you, Thomas, and thank you for being an advocate for peer support in the criminal justice system. And I wanted to know, how could we implement more peer support across the line? And the one concern I have is one peer support to connect with all the people that will be needing it in jail is quite a big feat, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the connection part of peer support and continued relationship. So how can we address that? Because I know that peer support is brought up a lot, and it is very supported by MacArthur Foundation, and it's person driven and on and on.
So I apologize, I missed the part about the jail. You're concerned about the jail?
One person handling, one peer supporter, if they hire, you said a peer supporter in the jail to connect with services and stuff, one person in the jail seems a little overwhelming to handle when our jobs are to connect and, move towards.
No, you're absolutely right. I'll give you an example. In New Orleans, they just implemented peer support specialists in the jail. And just from what we've seen almost immediately, some folks can consume an entire day of the peer support specialist because they're on the verge of getting out. They don't have the medications that they need to get them through the following week or two. They don't have a place to go exactly. They're hungry. And this person is really filling in to make sure that the person just doesn't go out in the community and end up right back. And so it is a very demanding task, and maybe one position isn't enough. One of the things that we actually talked about was the idea of the jail population manager filling a dual role and assisting the jail release navigator position. Maybe so you have like 1.5 positions, so to speak. And there's a lot of crossover in those two positions. I think they could really work off each other and share responsibilities. So that's just one idea. That's where we need to get into the brass tacks of how much money do you have? What ideas do we want to implement? And how it all fit together. And I think that has to be done in a smaller group. It would be so much easier if we were there. I gotta tell you, doing everything remotely makes things so much more challenging. But if it's 2 positions and we can make it work with the budget, that would be great. I do feel like even if there were only 2 peer support specialists, if there was a position added to probation to do the assessments, I think all those kind of share a certain element of helping people get through the system. And the general result is good for the flow how the criminal justice system works, and even the native navigator position that we talked about.
So Judge Jenks, did you have something else to add?
I just wanted to follow up on something that came up at the last meeting that I wish were given some emphasis in for this group moving forward, and that was some discussion about providing some method of assistance or funding for the required treatment programs. There was some discussion about batterers programs specifically, and also the chemical dependency follow-up treatments, the ACT. You know, that money's a barrier there, and it would be, I think it would be great if this group could prioritize some funding for that. I think it would help a lot of individuals. I think it would help a lot of people if we could do that. And I would love to see that become part of our focus moving forward. The other thing I wanted to say on that, somewhat related to that topic, and is that I think that a lot of people left that meeting last time with the belief that people were sitting in jail because they couldn't pay for their certificate. And I just want to assure everyone that was upset by that, that that's not actually something that is happening. You know, I even went in and double checked everybody that we had, because I have 2 other judges. You know, that just isn't something that's happening. But that doesn't mean that it's not a barrier and that it isn't important. And part of the goal to those treatment programs is so that we don't have another one, so that they're not coming back into the system, particularly with relating to DUIs. Somebody gets a felony DUI, they're going to be in jail. And we want to try and avoid that. So let's get them into the treatment programs and pay for it. If that's the problem, that we could pay for it, it would make a difference. So I just wanted to lobby for that. And I'll quit now.
So Senator Hill? Ellie, are you still there? So Diane Sands, any thoughts?
Yes, Senator Sands here. Those of us, I've sort of tried to round up our senators from Missoula who have interest in criminal justice reform to be on this call. And if there are specific issues where, say, state statute is a barrier, please let us know. We can try to work on that. As you know, funding is not going to be great this session. However, in our conversations with incoming Governor Gianforte, we know that he has a priority on drug courts, whatever that may mean. Fiscally, we do not know yet, but we would certainly be willing to be the advocates for additional funding or different kinds of funding for diversion programs. As you know, we've passed peer support legislation. So in whatever way state statute or policy comes into play with your programs, please count us in, and we would be happy to work together to try to ease that way as much as possible. And thank you for your work. It's so impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So obviously, we are getting a lot of folks that are benefiting from Medicaid expansion. To the extent that that becomes an issue, I hope that we can encourage you to, all of you, to continue to support that. Many of the defendants wouldn't access any treatment if they weren't able to get some health insurance through Medicaid. And, you know, we're hoping to provide greater treatment. As Judge Jenks said, those are barriers to success. And so that's just one area. So Senator Hill?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to dovetail on what Representative Tenenbaum and Senator Sands just alluded to, and that's that it does sound like we have a sort of a short timeline on a new grant, and I agree that there's some low-hanging fruit here that perhaps we could collaborate on in pretty short order. I just wanted to share the big three. The statewide notification system, I put in the meeting chat there. I am interested on what agency we were attempting to work through. I have visited already with our lobbyist friends at MACO about the idea. And if we're able to show through some other states the cost saving to the counties, I think there is some interest there. The second thing was the sober living. I was able to visit for 22 exact minutes with our new governor a few days ago. And it's really interesting, despite we sit on very different sides of the aisle. He is very, very interested, not just in youth in need of care and foster care stuff, but he's very interested in sober living. And he does have quite a bit of experience on some public-private partnerships that I know Aaron Couts and others have worked with the POV or the Y or with Western Montana Mental Health. So he seems to be willing to put in a budget, some money for sober living. So I'd like to visit about that. The third thing is, I think quite a few of you are aware that the new statewide administrator for OPD is going to be from Missoula, Brian Smith. And we've visited already about a Warrant Clinic idea, including the Native Peer Support idea. And so if that helps the grant for us to green light that a little faster, I'm sure he's very interested in having that conversation.
Great, good support.
Ellie,
thanks for the ideas.
Can I leap in? Ellie, I was going to type this in the column, but I don't know how to spell it. The person you want to talk to about the module for notification would be Beth McLaughlin.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I can provide an update on the conversation I had with Beth McLaughlin at the state. She is aware that the full court enterprise court reminder system is really important. They're in the middle of doing a statewide rollout and or update of full court enterprise, and they have a few other things that they want to roll out first. They are a little understaffed. They're also concerned about the recent election results and what their funding might look like in the future. And while Beth acknowledges that the full court enterprise would be the best place to have court reminders, it isn't at the top of the priority list because they are trying to do a statewide rollout and they have other things that, according to working groups, take precedent over that. And so I just want to say she knows it's important, but they've done some statewide working groups and have a priority list, and the court reminders are a little bit lower down on that. She mentioned loosely that they might be ready to look at it again in a couple of years. So it's not that it's not important, it's just been reprioritized.
Judge Holloway?
Good morning. I just felt like I want to step in here for a quick second and play off of what Judge Jinks had said, and then also a shout out to Senator Sands for asking how they can help. I know that as a Justice Court judge, we have limited access to treatment funds, and we always talk about what do we need for support, and it's usually treatment funds. I would like to announce that Justice Court received a $403,000 federal grant to expand our DUI court to incorporate municipal court defendants. That's going to take some work, and there's some things that we need to get accomplished, but that also comes with the funding to contract for chemical dependency services and the wraparound and getting to that root of that issue. And so Senator Sands, the legislature has allowed district courts to be funded for treatment courts, but municipal courts either need to be hardline funded through the county or the city or to go out and seek grants. And any sustainable program needs to have some type of regular funding and not grant based. So I know that Kristen Jordan has allowed us to be come back in January to talk a little bit more about our treatment court. So thank you. And that was part of our jail diversion master plan. And it kind of fits into how do we reduce those DUIs in the jail and our jail situation.
Congratulations. That's great. That'll be a great benefit for all of us to try to intervene a little sooner. Certainly the treatment issue will persist. And so I think if we can attack it in many different ways, hopefully we'll be a little more successful. So we're kind of getting close to the end of our meeting time. I indicated that I need to just do one item of business, which is to approve the meeting minutes from September 25th. I would just entertain a motion from one of the council members to do that.
Judge Halligan, this is Julie Merritt with the City Council. I would move to approve those minutes.
Is there a second?
This is Lori Pope from PFR Igniting Hope. I second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Any corrections? Anything you'd like to bring to my attention? If not, all those in favor of the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Same sign. Hearing none, the minutes will be approved. It's also time for public comment, and I certainly appreciate the very many folks who have joined us. We have fluctuating between like 45 and 49 folks who have joined the meeting. And so if there's any other people, public, other members of the council that would like to offer any public comment, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. So I see public defenders, other folks from other legislators. Any comments to help guide us as we try to prioritize these? We'll need to get some plans in place, but we're interested in your thoughts.
We have Robin Hammond who's raised her hand, Judge.
Robin?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So just a couple things. I am really interested in the idea of clear warrant calendars. I worked in other jurisdictions where they have these every day, and it's a really effective way to get people in and get their warrants cleared. In terms of district court, I know we've got those Mondays that we do arraignments now. It seems like it might be a good opportunity for people to be able to appear and possibly, just have a clear warrant calendar every month, every week, or something like that. Because when we lose, phone contact with our clients for various reasons, it'd be great if we could give them a date, that they could appear. The other suggestion just kind of popped into my mind was the idea of possibly putting daily court calendars on city buses, so that when we have clients who, lose access to phones, who are homeless, who can't get to OPD or somewhere else, if they could just check in with any bus going anywhere throughout the city, they might be able to see that they have a court date either that day that they might miss, or, so they could then get in contact with somebody or try to follow up that way.
So those are great ideas, Robin. I'm certain that, at least from the judge's perspective, I'm happy to bring that up with the judges. Perhaps you can discuss that amongst your peers, and I guess I'd ask some of the representatives from county attorney's office and prosecution and city attorney to also discuss that. Maybe we can collaborate on getting that. That seems like a less costly option moving forward that we could implement quickly. The bus option, maybe Chrome pads or something that were mounted in the buses might be a good option with some ability to check calendars. Good ideas. Hopefully we can pursue them. Any other thoughts? So Tom?
Yes. Before we leave, I just think it's really critical. We shared a lot of information with you, and we're running out of time, quite honestly. I was hoping that with the survey, we would get more delineation of what people would be in favor of and what they wouldn't be in favor of. But really, the numbers were quite high across the board for the different ideas. Some a little bit higher than others. But what we need now is for some kind of plan on how we're going to take this information that I shared with you today and whittle it down to fit into the grant application. So if I could, I'd like to request that a working group be formed to develop these ideas a little bit further and then bring them back to the CJCC in December.
So I think that it might be necessary to do a second survey, maybe with just a top 3 priorities, just so the working able to get a better idea. Obviously, there's many good ideas that we've discussed, but we're going to have to prioritize and then focus in on some. So what I'd ask, given we have not a lot of time, is that if you're interested in working on a working group, if you'll just add your name to chat, and then we will contact you. And then, Kristen, I guess my idea would be to to send out yet another survey, even to the folks that are on here that aren't council members, folks that have an interest, and ask people to rate their top, 3 or 4 tasks, just to give us a little better priority designation about how to prioritize the tasks. And then certainly if you had an idea that wasn't listed, you don't really want to be on the working group, and you feel like you want to just put in your notes today, feel free to add that to the chat and we can at least get some information. If you think of something later, if you could email that to Kristen, then the working group could meet. I know we have the holidays upon us, but we have some timelines on us as well. So I'd ask that all of your comments get to somebody, either through the working group, the survey, or to Kristen by the end of November, so November 30th. We'll begin working on prioritizing, but we'll leave it open. So if you have a great idea over Thanksgiving or a holiday when you're sheltering at home, eating turkey, that you have an opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you, Judge.
So, sure. And thank you, Tom, too, for helping us to kind of coalesce some of these ideas. I'm hoping that we can narrow those and kind of attack some of the good, inexpensive ideas that have come up, just to give them a run as to see how they'll work. So any other public comments or any other comments in general? Our next meeting will be January 22nd, 2021, and hopefully we'll be able to have provided you what our grant application priorities are prior to that meeting, and again give you some updates, perhaps from the treatment courts and others at that point.
Judge Halligan, this is Erin Couts again, and I just wanted to, I can't remember if Tom mentioned this, but the grant has to be in by January 8th, I believe. So just so people are aware of that timeline. And I think, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can ask for up to 700,000. Is that correct? Yeah, just so people know that that's kind of the parameters we're working within.
And I guess obviously good ideas, but energy is also needed. And so, as I said, we're all busy and it's tough to prioritize the time to put focus in, but it's an opportunity that I hope that we aren't going to let pass us by. So better now than never. And better now that we've got some information that's helpful and some issues that we know need to be addressed. Kristen, do you have any last comments?
I just wanted to acknowledge some of the chats that are coming through. We had Jana Staton, who commented on the length of stay for Native Americans that we unearthed in some of our research, and Caitlin Boardman from the ACLU is also seconding that comment. I'm not quite sure when or how to address these, but perhaps we can work offline to come up with a plan to address those. I just wanted to acknowledge that that's a really good point. We don't really totally know why it's happening in our system, other than probably just systemic racism and not working within best practices. But it certainly requires more of a conversation.
So again, I'll leave this on. We'll formally kind of adjourn. But if you want to add anything to chat before you sign off, please feel free to do that. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your interest, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Bye, everybody.